Dr. Bart Hodgins, this is kind of a funny question. You've just been adjusted. What do you do? Home protocols after an adjustment. I'm gonna walk you through it. There's basically 3 things that can happen to you after you've been adjusted. You feel awesome, it went perfect, everything's gone, you're all better, and you're very happy with that. 2, it's about the same. You get adjusted, you were hoping for it to be a miracle, but you feel about the same as you went in. And 3, you feel worse. Let's talk about each one of those. First of all, everything went awesome, you got adjusted. It was probably a fairly simple lesion, and once you got it remobilized, the body took over, your health status was already good to start with, so it was kind of like a one and done, or maybe a few adjustments and done. So it's gonna be much easier for you to go back to the things that you were doing before. I would just caution you, at least over the next 48 to 72 hours, lay low on anything really heavy, like really heavy exercise. So if you're a cyclist, for example, you get adjusted and feel great, sure, ride, but don't go kill yourself. Don't go do a giant race the next day, especially if it's the first time you've been adjusted by a chiropractor. Let that sink in a little bit. It takes, roughly 48 to 72 hours for the tissue to start really recognizing the change in the area. Okay, next one is you feel equivocal. Don't give up. It might take a little bit more time depending on what diagnosis you had. So same thing, even though it doesn't feel like anything really changed, especially if you hear something in that adjustment, that area has a physiologic change. So a couple things here. A, it might not be the right diagnosis. Often people get adjusted, there's something else happening, it might help a little bit or not at all, so we start looking around. So just because you don't improve doesn't mean you're not going to get there. It might take longer. I'm going to caution you the same way. You can do things you already could do, but I would encourage you not to take on anything new or forget about it, because it could lead to a bigger problem, even though it didn't seem like you had much help after that adjustment. What if you feel worse? So if you feel worse, sometimes people can get sore after an adjustment, especially if the body has to accommodate to it. You can imagine if a joint has been stuck. I'm just going to grab a model here. Lumbar spine, this is a low back. So if you get your low back adjustment, you're adjusting this area right here, and this has been stuck. Let's say it's been stuck for several weeks. It's reasonable that it could be sore to even very sore after your adjustment. That needs to heal up. So that's going to be important to talk to your doctor about. Let them know. That might change how they treat you, when your next visit is, those kind of things. I'm going to walk through a couple big no-nos after. So probably the worst thing you can do for your lumbar spine or your low back after you've been adjusted is movement where you're bending forward and you're twisted at a 45-degree angle, okay, and then you go lift something up or start a lawnmower. The reason for that is the lumbar spine, although moving very freely like this, right, it also is where the susceptibility of our low back is. A lot of injuries happen when people are twisted. For an example, you pick up something out of a shelf, it's way too heavy, you're twisted, and you're like, oh, and my back hurts, and then you lean forward there. So the same thing after you get adjusted, right? You want to be able to protect that area, and the best way to do it is to work in a fairly linear fashion. So if you're going to lift something up over here, instead of going like this, bending and hurting yourself, you turn towards the object, you bend your knees, and you use your thighs to lift that object. If you have muscle pain here from lifting, it's in the right spot. If you have tremendous pain right where you were adjusted in the lower back, you potentially are creating a new problem, or you're minimizing the success you had from that adjustment. The same thing goes in the neck. Often when people get their neck adjusted, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so good. But we want to be mindful. We don't want to be, going like this a whole bunch after, like if you had to reach for something behind you. We want to try to limit that rotation. Again, 48, 72, even an afternoon, let it sink in at least. So maintaining good posture and avoiding heavy rotation either way in the low back or in the neck is the best way to preserve the adjustment until you either talk to your doctor or move on with some home exercises.